Hello, everybody, and thank you very much to the TDCC for inviting me to speak today. As Sophie had mentioned, my name is John Goya. I'm the head of sales for EMEA and Asia Pacific for Meetyl, and today I'm going to be talking about new ways to engage with investors. I'm going to be kind of focusing on two parts of it. Initially, we'll be focusing on MiFID II and how that is changing the landscape from a corporate access perspective, and then we'll move on to talking about corporate governance engagement. So in terms of the agenda for the schedule, what I'll talk about first is the buy-side expectations, what has been happening with them, what to expect, as well as how it's starting to impact companies. And then I'll move on to the impact of investment stewardship. And finally, I'll talk about how technology can support some of this engagement, and I'll give a brief introduction into Meetyl and who we are, as well as what we do. So starting with the buy side, before MiFID II and before the unbundling of execution and research, most investors were still typically using the sell side for a lot of their corporate access, while there are still certainly those that would engage directly with companies. A majority would still use them regularly. But the amount of engagement directly with companies was a little bit reduced. Now, as a point of reference, so this information came from a survey from last year, so some of the points that I actually want to reference are how things have changed. So I intentionally left the points from March of 2018 because things do seem to have shifted a little bit even since then. So, for example, right, in terms of the payments post-MiFID II, it says 51% don't intend to pay for corporate access. I think that's a bit of a vague number now. I know that in Europe, having been there for the last couple of years, there are many that are certainly paying for the corporate access in one way or another. But then there are those such as Norges who have actively posted that they are not going to pay for corporate access. They'll absolutely take a meeting with you, but they're not going to be paying the sell side for those meetings. And what that also means is that even if you're working with a broker, it may mean there will be some additional work for companies. In terms of 32% plan to cover corporate access charges with direct cost to their P&L, I believe that number is significantly increased. A majority of the payments that are being made with regards to MiFID II are coming out of P&L rather than the soft dollars. And then 17% will pay a separate charge for corporate access from their research. MiFID II kind of requires that anyway, so it should be in some sort of separate account these days. So more will likely be paying separate from the research, even though certain sell-side firms are putting together packages, but they should be indicated what is for research and what is for corporate access. In terms of corporate access itself, 75% expect to meet with companies just as much. In my experience speaking with the buy side in Europe and some in the United States, that seems to be the trend. They're still seeing the same number of companies. It's just the way in which they might be seeing them has shifted a little bit while they are doing a little bit more direct engagement and companies are reaching out to them more. 54% will be reliant on companies reaching out to them directly and relying less on the sell side. That's absolutely the case. We are speaking to more companies that are being more proactive with companies. And there are a lot of cases where investors are happier to take a meeting directly from a company because they know that they don't have to meet with the sell side involved as well. And then in terms of preferences of types of meetings, this is about the same. 59% of prefer NDRs as opposed to reverse roadshows and conferences. And speaking from obviously an international perspective, I imagine that many Taiwanese companies don't necessarily travel as often offshore to either the United States or Europe, but it's still good to get in front of the investors if that's the audience you're looking to meet with. So, excuse me, with regards to for what corporates could expect from with regards to MiFID II and how it could be impacting you. So over the last couple of years, I've spoken to many hundreds of companies about what they're experiencing, what they're expecting with regards to MiFID II. And the first thing that I would say is if you are starting to receive an increase of direct outreach from the investors directly, where they want to be able to reach and have a conversation with you directly, that's certainly the case. What's happening with some of the larger institutions such as Norges and Wellington and Fidelity is many of them are setting up their own corporate access teams with the purpose of being able to maintain that relationship with the corporates. So it's important for you to understand if many of those institutions have a corporate access team set up so that you can engage with them properly. Reduced support from the sell side. So this has been happening in a number of different ways. In all across the world, it's not just in Europe. So to give you an example, I work with a number of Australian companies, and for some of these companies, they're getting less support from the sell side. So brokers may be only willing to take them to certain cities, such as New York or Boston, rather than some of the other cities that the companies themselves find valuable. Or in some cases, you may get invited to less conferences, or they may just not approach you to take you on the road. So it may mean that investor relations professionals will have to do a little bit more work themselves to ensure that they're putting themselves in front of the right types of investors that they want to see. What I would also say with regards to the support of the sell side is because of MiFID II, the number of clients that they will be having is likely to reduce, which means that if you're going on a roadshow to London with a broker, if they don't have a relationship with some of those investors may not take the meeting. They may just decline the meeting from the broker, and there are certain cases where an investor will decline a meeting from a broker and then immediately call the company, say, I'd like to meet, I just can't do it through the broker. So that's certainly something that you should be aware of. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's something to be aware of. And then finally, lower attendance at conferences. And this is probably going to be more specific to Europe, if you're attending a conference in Europe, because many of the investors are being charged quite a large fee in some cases to take one-on-one meetings with management. So they'll either opt in to join a group meeting where there's less value, or they may not attend at all, especially in cases where they might be an existing shareholder, because why would they don't feel they have to pay to see you. And the last thing that I'd say is with regards to the experiences of MiFID II, is every company is going to be different. Right? Not everyone is going to have the exact same experiences with it. If you're getting a lot of support from your brokers, that's fantastic. Continue to work with them, but also make sure that they're doing their job for you so that you're seeing the investors that you want to see, not just their clients and people that make sense for them. And then there are those that are struggling and that need to have more tools and have more time to be able to arrange some of these meetings if they want to be able to see some of the investors. So that's what I wanted to at least point out from a corporate access perspective. I will talk about in some ways that you can resolve that towards the end. But coming to corporate governance, I'm sure most of you are aware of who this gentleman is, Mr. Larry Fink from BlackRock. And last year, he had sent a letter to CEOs, as he does every year, where he called for a new model of corporate governance, one in which companies address the fact that society is demanding that companies, both public and private, serve a social purpose. He goes on to say that without a sense of purpose, no company, either public or private, can achieve their full potential. And ultimately, the company will provide subpar returns to investors. So for institutional investors and companies, a perfect storm has been brewing for some time. It started with expanded proxy voting and company meetings and the growing influence and size of passive and index-based investors. This was shortly followed by emboldened shareholder activists and increased acceptance of using environmental, social, and governance factors in investment decisions. However, it combined, in the combination of these factors, along with strong stewardship tailwinds from Europe, this is causing a capital markets sea change. For owners such as asset owners such as pensions, insurance accounts, sovereign wealth funds, there's an increasing demand on asset managers to embrace a greater investment stewardship. This has led to the phenomenon of passive investors becoming long-term active owners as opposed to more traditional roles of active managers and activists. The passive investors do not have the option of selling the stock by definition, so they're left with two choices. They can either meet the client's expectations and around investment stewardship and engage with companies in which they invest, or they can risk losing investment mandates to asset managers that meet the expectations of the asset owners. So what has the response been? So while the mainstream investment stewardship is relatively new in North America and Asia, the experience observed in Europe and Australia over the last 3 decades indicates that demand is not likely to slow anytime soon. In fact, it's fueling the global expansion of dedicated stewardship. BlackRock is among the largest teams, having over 30 people to manage the stewardship, followed by teams like Vanguard and Aberdeen, who have over 20, and even some of the U.S. pension funds, such as CalPERS and CalSTRS, have larger teams. Stewardship teams are increasingly integrated into the buy side. They are now working alongside in the same group as traditional investment analysts and portfolio managers, sharing meetings, company analysis, proxy voting, and investment decisions on companies. In many investment stewardship teams, hiring is increasingly leaning towards professionals with traditional buy-side backgrounds. In BlackRock's case, they're extending their team to corporate access. For companies, boards, executives, this means that regardless of one's personal or professional beliefs, investors are increasingly demanding that companies seriously consider, disclose, and address what they're doing around governance and broader ESG concerns, and how this is aligned with the corporate strategy and long-term returns. The stewardship wave is impacting the role of investor relations, company secretaries, general counsels, executives, and board members who are now spending more time doing corporate governance roadshows, analyst days, ESG and calls on ESG issues and proxy voting matters with both investors and the proxy advisors. Indeed, the ESG integration and investment stewardship can escalate globally, and we're seeing a rise of combined corporate access and corporate governance roadshows by both companies and the buy side. And this convergence of corporate access and shareholder engagement will only gather in pace based on the clients that we've seen increase the level of engagement they've had with both sides. So how can you resolve that? Well, one way certainly is using technology to help you, right? Many of the different investor relations professionals have a number of tools at their fingertips, but a lot of times it's separate tools and you have to collaborate them in one. Meetyl, as an example, is a both corporate access and corporate governance engagement tool, and it helps in a number of capacities. So first of all, it provides a database of both institutional contacts, such as portfolio managers and analysts, but it also has a database of corporate governance contacts globally, so that if you need to engage with those individuals, you have one database that helps you identify who they are. In addition, it provides an advanced workflow function that allows you to essentially set up a series of phone calls or plan an actual roadshow in a matter of minutes, and it simplifies the process rather than looking at Google Maps and trying to figure out where each individual institution is after you've arranged each meeting. Part of our targeting also includes matchmaking as well, so that you're making sure you're being put in front of the correct person. In terms of the workflow, we try to keep it fairly straightforward. You pick a city, you have your targets, and then you send out the invitations. One thing that is unique about Meetyl is being able to take logistics into consideration when necessary as well. Again, so that you're not traveling all over a city when you're looking to meet with your contacts. And to very quickly, I would like to show you a presentation. So this is actually how Meetyl works as a test account. This is a quick planner. So essentially, what it's doing is it's setting up the process of a roadshow. So all you have to do is select a city and select the date that you would like to attend. After that, it's going to move on to the targets section. So in this case, you would have your list of contacts that you would like to meet preloaded, and it can be for both corporate access and corporate governance roadshows, as well as pick the number of meetings that you want and how long in between each meeting. Once this is set, it will preload everything so that all you have to do is write the invitation, and it will send out all of the invites at one time. And it's based on a first come, first serve. So it eliminates any conflict of people picking the exact same time. But what it will also do, if it will take a step back to the schedule, is it will show you where all of the meetings are, and it shows that every individual is invited for every single time slot. So it avoids any type of overlap in that respect. It will also allow you to export the list of contacts in case you needed that as a result of to do any relevant follow-up. So that's the corporate access side of it. How Meetyl helps from a corporate governance perspective is it helps, first of all, with a contacts database. It gives you a tool to help arrange meetings, but also provides you information to help you prepare. So I've taken a screenshot here. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to show it live. So this is actually the voting history for Apple for 2018. So you'll notice that it shows the votes for and the votes against, and we have a partner that we work with to collect most of this information. And I would probably say the information is going to be sourced internationally, so the local voting would not be recognized, but it would show the international. So as you can see, I've selected Al Gore, who's a director at Apple, and what you'll notice, it shows the votes for and the votes against for 2018, and with the information that we pull in, it also will show you who voted, and if they provide it, why they may have voted against. And with Meetyl, you can search not only your company, but any other company. So if you're interested in how some of the events went for your peers, you're able to search that information. Once you've identified which firm you would like to speak to, we have a database of contacts, as I mentioned, so that you can identify who that relevant person is to request a meeting. In addition to that, to help you prepare, we also provide the rules of engagement and policy guidelines, so that you don't have to go looking for it on the different websites, which oftentimes is very difficult to find. So that is my very brief presentation. I welcome any questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, no?